Two things if you don't mind before we get started. First, yeah, I know I called Rachel Weisz's character Evie Hammond in the Mummy Returns video. For clarity, Evie Hammond is this character, not this character. My mistake, it turns out Hammond is a lot easier to remember than Carnahan. And second, if you are sensitive to content that deals with the issues of depression, anxiety, and suicide, this is a warning that the movie that we're just talking about today contains depictions of said issues throughout. Now, I'm far from a mental health professional, and while I will tread as lightly as I can on that note, it's still gonna come up.
Hey, you want some good parental advice? Don't listen to me. Don't listen.
Also, even though I won't be showing the more gruesome visual aspects of this movie, just know that the subject matter is a little bit more intense this go around. So, no shame if you want to sit this one out. I'm gonna do a fun one next time.
That sounds good.
We are now in this strange seasonal in-between that happens every year. You know, the feeling that summer is winding down and fall is ramping up, but it's still technically summer, but everyone wants it to be fall, but we're not ready for it to get cold yet, but also we are and want to start decorating for Halloween and wearing sweaters, but aren't ready to not be able to go swimming anymore. My point being, I'm desperately holding on to the warm weather while also being ready for things to get scary. So what better way to embrace this transition than by getting our spooky season movie started with a macabre tale that takes place in the bright, colorful, and warm Swedish countryside. Midsommar is director Ari Aster's second major feature film after 2018's Hereditary, which I will attest is one of the scariest movies, if not the scariest movie, that I've ever seen. Taking place during the Nordic pagan celebration, Midsommar differs itself from many a horror movie by setting itself in bright, shining, colorful daytime as opposed to the dark and stormy nights that audiences will often attribute to the genre. Led by a fantastic performance by Florence Pugh as the distressed and tortured Dani, the movie's cast is stacked with actors like Jack Reynor, Will Poulter, William Jackson Harper, and Wilhelm Blomgren, who bring this frightening tale of anxiety, guilt, gaslighting, indoctrination, and extremely well-lit and symmetrical set pieces to life. So as we count down the remaining days of summer and get ready to embrace the scariest season of them all, let's pack our bags, jump on a plane to Sweden, bask in the clear blue skies, pour a nice cold beverage, maybe skipping the psychoactive drinks that seem to be all the rage with sinister cults, and let's just talk about a movie. The term elevated horror is thrown around a lot recently, and with the onset of directorial debuts from people such as Robert Eggers, Jordan Peele, and of course Ari Aster, just to name a few, it's easy to see why this subset of the horror genre has risen to prominence with films like The Witch, Get Out, The Lighthouse, and Midsommar. By the way, if my range of directors and movies that can be described as elevated horror seems limited, it's because it is, and I promise I'm working on expanding my horizons. As someone who has loved the horror genre from a very young age, starting with my pretty accidental viewing of Child's Play at like 2 a.m. when I woke up on the living room couch and was forever changed by seeing Chucky stalk Andy Barkley with those really unnatural movements, seeing it evolve in the years since has been a bit of a roller coaster. Horror has always seemed like a very experimental and widely changing genre, in my opinion, more so than the other genres of entertainment out there. And like other art forms, what scares us is subjective, so Ghostface picking off Sidney Prescott's friends one by one may not be as frightening to someone who was thoroughly creeped out by Michael Myers. The Exorcist, largely regarded to be the scariest movie ever made, may fall flat for someone who is unnerved by the demons and otherworldly spirits of The Conjuring. What scares the audience will always change over time, so a genre dominated by slashers, monsters, mutants, and ghosts will have to as well. Fear is ever-changing. Bursting out of the chest of the horror genre has come elevated horror, scary tales that take an interesting look at parts of human existence against a more traditional, frightening setting. The Babadook, for example, on the surface is your run-of-the-mill haunted house story. Even the marketing points it to be something more akin to a monster movie than anything else. But The Babadook isn't a movie about a monster. It's a movie about what the monster represents, which is grief, and the attempts of those who feel it to deny its existence and bury it deep down. As much as Midsommar is the story of a lethal cult victimizing an unwitting group of tourists visiting the rural Swedish village of Hårga, it's also the story of a broken person unable to express her anxiety, grief, and need for support after the murder-suicide of her sister claims the lives of her parents as well. Florence Pugh and Jack Reynor expertly played Dani and Christian, two people in the death throes of a relationship on its last legs, in a situation that I feel many people have probably found themselves in, knowing they'd both be better off away from each other, but both too reluctant to let go of what's familiar. Dani, having just lost her family, has latched onto to Christian as her main means of support, while Christian, though uncaring and aloof, stays with Dani because it's his nature. He's unmotivated and avoidant, choosing instead to stay with Dani out of the guilt of leaving her in such a traumatizing time in her life, and most likely hoping the situation figures itself out. This allows the people of Hårga to prey upon Dani's sensibilities, using what they see of the dynamic between Dani, Christian, and Christian's friends to sense that Dani is emotionally very alone.
He's my good friend and I like him, but Dani, do you feel held by him? Does he feel like home to you?
And as what we all expected to happen, the ritualistic murder of Christian's friends comes to pass, the Hårgas use the ever-mounting intensity to drive the final separating wedge between the couple. They successfully manipulate Dani's feelings of rejection by Christian into mistrust and earned resentment. Bing bang boom, Christian is burned to death by the Hårgas and Dani looks on smiling, finally free of the toxic relationship that's held her down for so long, allowing her and the audience to feel the catharsis she's been deprived of. At least, that's what it looks like from a very surface-level glance. This scene in particular has drawn so many takes from people who've seen the movie, with the most prevalent being, this isn't a yes queen boss bitch moment of empowerment. You thought it was, your perception of the movie is wrong, and you're wrong, and you're very horrible. It's very horrible what happened and shouldn't be celebrated, yada yada yada. But this feeling of relief or empowerment, or for lack of a better term, good for her, is meant to be felt by the audience, as are the feelings of disgust and shock at the events that have transpired and the brutality with which the actions were taken. In fact, according to the director, it's really a mixture of both that's being conveyed on screen.
We were going for like this lushness and this, romance and this symphonic quality, and it was just very important that it felt just cathartic, and I think we were going for this feeling of awe as opposed to a feeling of horror.
The audience is supposed to be subject to the power and methods of indoctrination during this moment. Watching the movie, we know that Dani isn't stupid, gullible, or naive, but she is vulnerable. Throughout the movie, we see her struggling with the post-traumatic stress of her sister's murder-suicide, with absolutely no moment afforded to her to properly express any sort of grief. She's allowed one good cry at the beginning of the film, and that's it. In scenes where she's shown to be affected by the stress of it all, it's quite literally cut short, and in the desperation of keeping any semblance of support, she allows Christian and his friends to almost dismiss her entirely out of the fear of losing the support she really doesn't even have. Christian sees her as a dead weight on his life and offers little comfort, that is, until they get to Hårga. Yes, the cult is actively preying on Dani's vulnerability, but like it or not, they're also providing her a service, support. Even more so, unconditional support. They offer her the sense of togetherness that she lost when her family died, and what her boyfriend could not, or rather outright refused to supply for her. In a scene where Dani finally gets to break down and just cry, the women of the cult not only allow her to cry, but actively participate in her wails of heartbreak. Yes, it's all predatory. The fragility of Dani's relationship is picked at deliberately to finally get it to crumble. The cult separates Dani from who she's familiar with and orchestrates the events that would lead to their deaths for ritual purposes. Christian is even drugged and forced to engage in sex with another Hårga woman, not only as another aspect of the Midsommar rituals, but to finally sever the ties that Dani has to her previous life by allowing her to witness it, ensuring that when it came time for Christian to die, Dani would find solace in it. Christian didn't deserve to go out that way. Yeah, he's an awful boyfriend and a selfish and unmotivated person, but Dani's empowerment and relief in the end is not the result of Christian's comeuppance or deservedness of a painful demise, but of her full indoctrination into the Hårgas. And as twisted and as brutal as it is, Dani has finally found what she needed all along: belonging.